Dramily.com, unlimited drama series.
The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers for the third time, clattering against the concrete floor of my garage like a death rattle. Midnight wasn't exactly prime time for fixing a transmission, but sleep had become as elusive as my wife's honesty these days. At least the truck's problems were fixable, unlike everything else falling apart in my life. You know what they say about fixing things that are broken beyond repair? I muttered to the empty garage, wiping motor oil on my already stained coveralls. Sometimes you're just postponing the inevitable. Through the thin walls separating the garage from our kitchen, I caught the soft murmur of Sarah's voice. At first, I figured she was on another late-night call with her real estate clients. My wife had always been ambitious, climbing the ladder in our small New England town's competitive housing market. But something about her tone made me pause, wrench halfway to the transmission pan. "I can't wait to see you this weekend," she whispered, and my blood turned to ice water. He'll never suspect anything. He's too busy playing with his tools to notice what's right in front of him. The garage suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in like a coffin. 22 years of marriage, and I was hearing my wife plan a romantic getaway with someone who definitely wasn't me. The transmission fluid dripping onto the concrete sounded like a metronome counting down the seconds of my old life. I set the wrench down carefully, fighting the urge to hurl it through the window. Getting angry wouldn't change anything. Getting smart might. The kitchen door burst open and our 17-year-old daughter, Emma, stormed in, her phone glued to her ear like a permanent appendage. She barely glanced at me before launching into her latest grievance. "Dad, Mom says you're being weird about money again. She deserves better than this fixer-upper life you've trapped us in. Maybe if you actually made something of yourself instead of crawling under broken cars all day." "Emma!" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Your mother and I need to talk." She rolled her eyes with the dramatic flair only teenagers could master. "Whatever. I'm going to Ashley's house. At least her dad drives a decent car." The sting of her words hit deeper than expected. When had I become the family disappointment? When had providing for them become something to be ashamed of? Sarah appeared in the doorway, looking guilty as hell, but trying to play it off with a bright smile. "Still working on that old truck? You know we could just buy something new if you'd stop being so stubborn about money." "Funny you should mention money." I stood up slowly, every joint protesting after hours, hunched over the engine. "I was just thinking about budgets, like how much a weekend getaway might cost." Her smile flickered for just a moment, so brief I might have imagined it. "What are you talking about?" "Nothing, honey. Just wondering where you're planning to go with the girls this weekend." "Oh, probably that little bed and breakfast in Vermont. Nothing fancy." She was good, I had to give her that. Lying came as naturally as breathing. I nodded and picked up my tools. "Well, have fun. I'll probably spend the weekend working on the cabin." The lakeside property I'd inherited from my uncle had been sitting empty for 2 years. Sarah always complained it was too rustic, too far from civilization. Perfect place for a man to think without interruption. After she disappeared back into the house, I stood in the garage for a long time, listening to the old building settle around me. Tomorrow I'd start paying closer attention to my wife's activities. Tonight I'd plan, because if Sarah wanted to play games, she was about to learn that her husband wasn't quite the simple-minded contractor she thought he was. Tuesday morning brought the kind of gray, drizzling weather that matched my mood perfectly. Sarah had left early for client meetings, which I now suspected meant something entirely different. Emma was at school, probably telling her friends more stories about her loser father. I'd always handled the laundry in our house, one of those domestic arrangements that developed over the years. Sarah claimed she was too busy with work, and I didn't mind the routine. Today, that routine paid off in ways I never expected. Her blazer from yesterday hung in the closet, but the pants were in the hamper. As I sorted through the pile, my fingers found something unusual in the pocket, a small flip phone I'd never seen before. My hands shook as I opened it. The message history read like a romance novel, written by someone with no imagination. "Can't stop thinking about last night. You're incredible. Meet me at the Riverside Motel Thursday, room 237. I love you too. Soon we won't have to hide anymore." The contact was saved simply as D, but the number belonged to Derek Morrison, Sarah's business partner. I'd met him dozens of times at company parties, shaken his hand, listened to him compliment my wife's sales skills. The whole time, He'd been planning to steal my life. I took photos of every message, then carefully placed the phone back where I'd found it. Evidence was good. Evidence was power. The rest of the day passed in a haze of normal activities that felt anything but normal. I fixed Mrs. Henderson's leaky faucet, gave an estimate for bathroom renovation to the Kowalskis, picked up supplies at the hardware store. All the while, my mind churned with possibilities. That evening, Sarah came home with takeout Chinese food and a story about showing houses all day. She seemed more animated than usual, practically glowing with some inner satisfaction. I wondered if Derek had anything to do with her good mood. "How was your day?" she asked, settling onto the couch with her lo mein. "Productive. I'm thinking of spending more time at the cabin. Maybe fix it up, make it livable." She wrinkled her nose. "That old place? It's practically falling down. Wouldn't it make more sense to sell it and buy something decent?" "Maybe, but I like working with my hands. You know that." Emma wandered in from her room, earbuds dangling around her neck. "Are we seriously eating Chinese food again? Ashley's family goes to actual restaurants." "Ashley's family can afford actual restaurants because Ashley's dad isn't obsessed with fixing junk," Sarah said, shooting me a pointed look. I set down my chopsticks carefully. "I provide for this family just fine." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're more interested in your projects than your actual responsibilities." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. After 22 years, she was rewriting our history, painting me as the villain in her story. It made betraying me easier, I supposed. "You're right," I said finally. "I should focus more on what really matters." Sarah smiled, probably thinking she'd won some kind of victory. Emma nodded approvingly, already back to scrolling through her phone. Neither of them noticed the edge in my voice. Later that night, after they'd both gone to bed, I sat in the garage with Derek's business card in my hand. I'd had it for years, tucked in my wallet behind my insurance cards. Derek Morrison, commercial real estate, with his cell phone number printed in neat black letters. The same number that had been sending my wife love messages. I fired up my laptop and started researching. Derek's business had been struggling lately. Several deals had fallen through, and there were rumors about his methods. Interesting how a man with financial problems suddenly had money for hotel rooms and romantic getaways. By dawn, I had a plan forming. It wasn't pretty and it wasn't kind, but it was thorough. If Sarah and Derek wanted to destroy my family, they'd learn that I was much better at destruction than they'd ever imagined. Thursday arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of perfect spring day that made everything seem possible, including revenge. I knew Sarah would be at the Riverside Motel by 3 o'clock. Room 237, according to her secret phone. Derek's flashy silver SUV would be parked outside, impossible to miss in a place that usually catered to truckers and traveling salesmen. I spent the morning working on legitimate jobs, keeping my routine normal. But by 2:30, I was parked across the street from the motel, watching Derek's vehicle sit empty in the afternoon sun. The Riverside was exactly the kind of place you'd expect for a cheap affair. Peeling paint, flickering neon sign, rooms that rented by the hour. Classy operation Derek was running. I waited until 3:45, giving them time to get comfortable. Then, I walked across the parking lot like I owned the place, carrying my toolbox and wearing my work clothes. Just another contractor fixing something that was broken. Derek's SUV was unlocked. People in small towns still trusted each other, apparently. I popped the hood and loosened his alternator belt. Not enough to strand him immediately, but enough to cause problems later. Then, I used my pocket knife to let some air out of his rear tire. Not flat, just low enough to be annoying. For the finishing touch, I slipped a note under his windshield wiper. Drive safe, Derek. Wouldn't want you to have car trouble on your way home. By the way, Sarah's husband says hello. The walk back to my truck felt like floating. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't the victim of someone else's story. I made it home before Sarah, giving me time to act normal when she walked through the door at 6:15, claiming she'd been showing properties all afternoon. "How was your day?" I asked, not looking up from the newspaper. "Busy, really busy. You know how it is with spring buyers." "I bet. Anything interesting happen?" She paused for just a moment. "No, just the usual. What about you?" "Fixed the Henderson sink, worked on some estimates." "Oh, and I ran into your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, at the hardware store. She mentioned seeing Derek's car at that motel out on Route 9. Thought that was weird. Didn't seem like his kind of place." Sarah's face went pale, then flushed red. "I wouldn't know anything about that." "Of course not. Why would you?" We ate dinner in relative silence, Emma providing occasional commentary about her day at school. Normal family stuff, except for the undercurrent of tension crackling between Sarah and me like a live wire. Around 8 o'clock, Sarah's regular phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it, frowned, and excused herself to the bathroom. When she came back, she looked shaken. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine, just work stuff." But I could see the wheels turning in her head. Derek had obviously told her about the note, about the car problems. She was trying to figure out how much I knew, how much I suspected. Let her wonder. That night, I lay in bed listening to Sarah toss and turn beside me. Every few minutes, she'd check her phone, the screen casting blue shadows across her worried face. "Can't sleep?" I asked. "Just thinking about work." "Anything I can help with?" She turned to look at me in the darkness, and for a moment, I saw something that might have been guilt or fear. "No," she said finally. "I'll handle it myself." "You always do." The next morning brought the first real consequence of my little prank. Sarah's phone rang at 7 a.m., and I could hear Derek's agitated voice even from across the kitchen. "What do you mean someone left a note?" Sarah hissed into the phone, glancing nervously in my direction. I continued reading my coffee mug like it contained the secrets of the universe. "I don't know how he could know," she continued. "We've been careful." Apparently not careful enough. After she hung up, Sarah stood in the kitchen for a long moment, staring at nothing. I could practically hear her brain working, trying to calculate damage control. "Derek having car trouble?" I asked innocently. She jumped like I'd electrocuted her. "What?" On the phone, sounded frustrated about something. "Oh, yes, his alternator or something. You know how unreliable those foreign cars can be." Actually, Derek drove a Chevy, but I didn't correct her. "Well," I said, standing up and grabbing my keys, "if he needs a mechanic, I know a guy. Tell him I'd be happy to take a look." The expression on Sarah's face was worth every minute I'd spent in that motel parking lot. The weekend brought an unexpected development. Emma burst into the kitchen Saturday morning, waving her phone like a victory flag. "Mom, you have to see this. I posted that TikTok about Dad's weird behavior, and it's already got 3,000 views." My blood turned to ice. "What TikTok?" Emma turned the screen toward me, and I watched 17 years of fatherhood crumble in 60 seconds. She'd filmed herself in her bedroom, explaining to the internet how her dad was acting super paranoid and jealous, and probably having some kind of midlife crisis. "He's been following Mom around and asking weird questions about her work," Emma explained to her followers. Like, get a life, dude. Maybe if you weren't such a loser, she wouldn't need space from you. The video had dozens of comments, mostly from her friends at school. They were laughing at me, calling me pathetic, making jokes about boomer dads who couldn't handle their wives having careers. "Take it down," I said quietly. "What? No way, this is going viral. Ashley says I should make a whole series about our dysfunctional family." Sarah walked in just then, saw the phone in Emma's hand, and her face lit up with interest. "What's going viral?" "Emma's video about me." Sarah watched the TikTok, and I saw something shift in her expression. Not embarrassment or concern for our family's privacy, satisfaction. Like this was exactly what she'd been hoping for. "Emma, maybe you should," she started, but without much conviction. "Should what?" "Tell the truth. Dad's been acting like a total creep lately." I looked at my wife and daughter, really looked at them, and realized I was completely alone in my own house. They'd already written me off. turned me into the villain of their story. The cheating, the lies, the public humiliation, it was all justified in their minds, because I was just the boring husband and father who didn't deserve better. You're right, I said finally. I have been acting weird lately. Maybe I should give you both some space. What do you mean? Sarah asked, and for the first time she sounded uncertain. I'm going to spend some time at the cabin, work on fixing it up. You two can have the house to yourselves. Emma perked up immediately. Really? For how long? As long as it takes. I spent the rest of Saturday packing my tools and clothes. Sarah hovered around, asking questions about bills and maintenance and when I'd be back. But I could tell she was relieved. With me out of the picture, she and Derek could carry on their affair without worrying about suspicious husbands. What she didn't know was that I'd been preparing the cabin for weeks. New locks, security cameras, high-speed internet.
She just gave me a massage! That's it!
Remember! I won't be a fool!
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Everything I needed for the next phase of my plan. Sunday morning, I loaded my truck and drove the 45 minutes to the lake. The cabin sat on 2 acres of wooded property, far enough from neighbors to ensure privacy. Uncle Pete had built it himself back in the 70s. Solid construction, good bones. With some work, it could be quite comfortable. I spent the day setting up my temporary headquarters, installing the last of the surveillance equipment, and testing the internet connection. By evening, I had a clear view of our house through the wireless cameras I'd hidden weeks ago. The first night alone, I watched Sarah pace around the kitchen, talking animatedly on her phone. She looked happier than I'd seen her in months. Free. Emma was in her room, probably making more videos about her absent father. I opened a beer and settled in to watch my family's real feelings about me. It was educational in a soul-crushing sort of way. Around 10 p.m., Derek's SUV pulled into my driveway. My driveway, my house, my wife. I watched through the camera as Sarah let him in through the back door, as they embraced in my kitchen as they walked upstairs to my bedroom. 22 years of marriage, and she was replacing me before I'd been gone 24 hours. But anger was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not yet. I had work to do. Monday morning brought the first real consequences of Emma's viral TikTok. My phone started ringing at 7 a.m. with calls from clients, friends, and neighbors who'd seen the video or heard about it through the town's gossip network. "Mike, is everything okay?" asked Mrs. Patterson, my elderly neighbor. "Emma's video is all over Facebook now. People are saying you've been stalking Sarah." "I'm fine, Mrs. Patterson. Just some family stuff we're working through." "Well, if you need anything," but her tone suggested she'd already picked a side, and it wasn't mine. The calls continued throughout the day. Some were genuinely concerned, but most carried an undercurrent of judgment. In a small town, being labeled as the jealous, paranoid husband was social death. By noon, I'd lost 3 clients. The Kowalskis called to cancel their bathroom renovation, claiming they'd decided to go with someone else. The Hendersons suddenly didn't need their kitchen cabinets after all. Even my regular commercial accounts started making excuses. Sarah's strategy was working perfectly. Destroy my reputation first, then divorce me from a position of strength. The wronged wife, escaping her unstable husband. That evening, I drove into town for supplies and stopped at Murphy's Bar, the kind of place where working men gathered to complain about their lives over cheap beer. I'd been going there for 15 years, considered most of the regulars friends. The conversation died when I walked in. "Hey, Mike," said Tommy Murphy, the owner and my oldest friend in town. But his greeting lacked its usual warmth. I ordered a beer and tried to act normal, but I could feel the stares, hear the whispered conversations. Emma's video had painted me as a pathetic, controlling husband, and in a town where everyone knew everyone, that reputation spread like wildfire. "Heard you're staying out at the cabin," said Bill Crawford, a plumber I'd worked with dozens of times. "Giving Sarah some space?" "Something like that." "Probably for the best," chimed in Dave Peterson. "Women need room to breathe, you know? Can't be hovering over them all the time." The irony was overwhelming. While they lectured me about giving my wife space, she was probably entertaining Derek in our bedroom. "You guys are right," I said, finishing my beer. "Sarah deserves better." I left Murphy's knowing I'd never be welcome there again, The court of public opinion had reached its verdict, and I was guilty as charged. But as I drove back to the cabin, I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Sarah thought she'd isolated me, turned me into a pariah. What she didn't realize was that she'd also freed me from caring what anyone thought. When you've got nothing left to lose, you can do anything. Back at the cabin, I opened my laptop and started working. If the town wanted to believe I was the villain, I'd give them a villain worth talking about. I started with Derek's business. A few anonymous tips to the Better Business Bureau about his questionable practices, screenshots of complaints from previous clients, forwarded to his biggest accounts. Nothing illegal, just information that was already public record. Then I moved on to Sarah's real estate license. Turned out she'd exaggerated her credentials on her company bio, claiming education she'd never completed. A simple email to her broker with documentation should clear that up. Emma's social media was a goldmine of teenage oversharing. Screenshots of her underage drinking at parties, her complaints about teachers and classmates, her detailed accounts of family finances and private conversations, all forwarded anonymously to the right people. By midnight, I'd planted enough seeds to keep the town gossips busy for months. Sarah wanted a war? She was about to get one. And unlike her, I played to win. 3 days later, the consequences of my digital warfare started showing results. Sarah called me Wednesday evening, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Mike, we need to talk." "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Can you come home?" "It's not my home anymore, remember? You and Emma made that pretty clear. Please, this is important." I could hear the desperation creeping in, which meant my plan was working. "I'll be there in an hour." The drive back to town felt strange, like visiting a place I used to live. When I pulled into the driveway, Derek's SUV was nowhere to be seen. Apparently, he'd made himself scarce when the heat started rising. Sarah met me at the door, and I was shocked by how haggard she looked. 3 days of consequences had aged her years. "Come in," she said. "Emma's at Ashley's house." We sat in the living room like strangers, the space between us on the couch feeling like an ocean. "I lost my job," she said without preamble. "I'm sorry to hear that." "No, you're not. You did this. Somehow you sent my boss information about my resume, about things I said in private emails. Don't try to deny it." I shrugged. "I've been at the cabin for 3 days. How could I have done anything?" "I don't know, but I know it was you. Just like I know you left that note on Derek's car." "Derek's having car trouble? That's too bad." She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. "His business is falling apart. Clients are canceling contracts, spreading rumors about his methods, and Emma..." She stopped, her voice breaking. "What about Emma?" "Someone sent screenshots of her social media to the school principal. She's suspended for 3 days, and her college applications are in jeopardy." I felt a momentary pang of guilt about Emma, but it passed quickly. She'd chosen her side, made her bed with viral videos and public humiliation. "That's unfortunate," I said. "But what does any of this have to do with me?" Sarah whirled around, her composure finally cracking. "Stop playing games. I know you're behind this. I know you found out about Derek and me." "Found out what exactly?" "You know what. I know my wife has been lying to me for months. I know she's been meeting her business partner at cheap motels. I know my daughter thinks I'm a joke and broadcasts our private business to the internet. But I'm just the paranoid husband, right? The loser who doesn't deserve honesty from his own family." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah's face cycled through several emotions: guilt, anger, fear, and finally, defiance. "You want the truth? Fine. Yes, I'm having an affair. Yes, I love Derek. And yes, I want a divorce." There it was. 22 years of marriage ended with the emotional impact of a grocery list. Thank you for your honesty," I said calmly. "I'll have my lawyer contact yours." "That's it? That's all you have to say?" I stood up, straightening my jacket. "What did you expect? Begging? Tears? A big dramatic scene for you to post on social media?" "I expected something. Some kind of reaction. You've been planning this for months, Sarah. You and Derek worked out every detail, turned our daughter against me, destroyed my reputation in town. What reaction could I possibly have that would matter now?" She stared at me like I was a stranger. "I never meant for it to go this far." Yes, you did. You wanted me gone, and you found the most humiliating way to make it happen. Congratulations. You succeeded. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Sarah, you might want to be careful about the company you keep. Derek's business problems are just getting started. What do you mean? Nothing illegal, don't worry. Just information finding its way to the right people. Amazing what you can discover when you start looking. I left her standing in the living room, probably trying to figure out what other shoes were about to drop. The drive back to the cabin felt like freedom. 2 weeks after our confrontation, I was ready for the final phase of my plan. Sarah had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and asking for half of everything, plus alimony. Derek's business had collapsed completely, and he'd left town rather than face his creditors. Emma was back in school, but under academic probation, her college prospects dimmed by her own social media indiscretions. The town had largely forgotten about me, moved on to fresher gossip, which was exactly what I'd been counting on. I sent 3 text messages that Thursday evening to Sarah. We need to discuss the divorce settlement. Meet me at the cabin Saturday at 7 p.m. Come alone. To Emma, time we had an honest conversation about our family. Cabin Saturday, 7 p.m. To Derek, I'd kept his number. Sarah's in trouble. She needs you at the lake cabin Saturday, 7 p.m. Don't let her down now. I spent Friday setting up the cabin for what I hoped would be the final act of this whole drama. Cameras in every room, audio recording equipment, and a live stream ready to broadcast to a private Facebook group I'd created, one that included half the town's most notorious gossips. Saturday arrived gray and drizzly, perfect weather for endings. Sarah showed up first, at exactly 7 o'clock. She looked nervous but determined, probably expecting to negotiate some kind of settlement that would leave me with nothing. Thank you for coming, I said, letting her into the cabin. Let's just get this over with. What do you want? Honesty. For once in our marriage, I want complete honesty. Emma arrived 20 minutes later, clearly annoyed at being dragged away from her friends. This better be important, Dad. I have plans tonight. Oh, it's important. Derek was the last to arrive, slinking up to the cabin like a man approaching his own execution. When he saw Sarah's car in the driveway, confusion flickered across his face. What's he doing here? Sarah demanded when Derek walked through the door. I could ask you the same thing, Derek replied, his eyes darting between us. Sit down, everyone, I said, gesturing to the chairs I'd arranged in a circle. We're going to have the conversation we should have had months ago. I walked to my laptop and clicked a button. Oh, and just so we're all on the same page, this is being broadcast live to about 50 of our closest friends and neighbors. Say hello to the good people of Millbrook. The blood drained from all 3 faces simultaneously. You can't do this, Sarah whispered. Actually, I can. This is my property, and you're all here voluntarily. Now let's start with you, Sarah. Tell everyone about your affair. Turn off the camera, Mike. Please. Not until we're done. Emma, why don't you explain to the nice people how you humiliated your father on social media for internet points? Emma looked like she was going to be sick. Dad, please. And Derek. I turned to the man who'd been sleeping in my bed. Tell us about your business practices, the bribes, the falsified inspections, the clients you cheated. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out a folder thick with documents. Really? Because I have emails, bank records, witness statements. Amazing what people remember when they're angry about being ripped off. The room fell silent except for the sound of rain against the windows. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. Sarah, you're going to withdraw your divorce petition and agree to a fair split of assets. No alimony, no claims on the cabin or my business. Emma, you're going to publicly apologize for your TikTok videos and take responsibility for your own college applications. And Derek, I smiled at the man who'd tried to steal my life. Derek's going to leave town and never come back. Because if he doesn't, I'm going to release all this evidence to the police, the IRS, and every news outlet in the state. You're insane, Derek said, but his voice shook. No, I'm thorough. Did you really think I'd just roll over and let you destroy my family without consequences? Sarah found her voice. The broadcast. Turn it off, please. People are watching. I glanced at my laptop screen. The viewer count was climbing steadily as word spread through the town's social networks. They certainly are. Looks like we have about 200 viewers now. Should I take questions from the audience? This is blackmail, Derek said. This is justice. You three decided to make my private business public. Now I'm returning the favor. Emma was crying now, probably realizing that her social media popularity was about to turn into social media infamy. What do you want from us? Sarah asked. I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want Derek to disappear. And I want my family back. What's left of it? And if we don't agree? I shrugged. Then the whole town gets to watch this conversation, and Derek gets to explain his business practices to a grand jury. Derek stood up abruptly. I'm not listening to this. Sit down, I said quietly, or I'll release everything tonight instead of giving you a chance to leave quietly. He sat. For the next hour, I methodically dismantled the conspiracy that had destroyed my marriage. I showed the evidence of Derek's fraud, played recordings of Sarah's lies, displayed screenshots of Emma's cruel social media posts. The town watched it all in real time. By